Hi, Christopher here from Musical U, and I'm here with Gregg Goodhart, the learning coach, to get answers to the biggest burning questions and points of frustration that came up in our recent survey about music practice. One of the things that really came out in the survey was overwhelm, and in the age of the internet more than any other time, I'm sure, we feel like there are 17 different things we should be working on, and we should do our scales and our arpeggios and our fingering and this passage, and we should prepare for that recital, and we should make sure we do a bit of this and a bit of that. And people were asking again and again, how can I know what to practice? If I'm going to set aside this time and I'm going to give it my all, should I be doing 4 things in each session, 3 things? Is it better to just work on repertoire for a month? And, endless options and combinations. How can we all know how best to spend our practice time?
Well, I always call it meeting the student where they're at. For instance, I use an example. If you write on the board to be or not to be, you say that's Shakespeare. And the student looks at the board and, okay, have you ever heard of Shakespeare? No. Okay. Can you read this sentence? No. Okay. Do you know what words are? No. Okay. Do you know the alphabet? Yes. It's time to make sure you know the alphabet and start learning how to form words. Stop trying to read Shakespeare. And then I know the reaction to that is great. You're going to tell me I have to do stuff little teeny things I don't like so that in a year maybe I can play a song. No, what actually happens is what's keeping you from playing the songs you want are all the little teeny things that aren't working for you. When you start taking care of one of them, you will immediately get better at everything you play. So I used to really drill down with kids. Where's your finger going? Check that. And there's a process of deliberate practice, which is this plan, do, reflect thing where you reflect every time. How much do we reflect when we're practicing? Do we really pay attention to where the finger is? Or do we just accept that the sound is good enough to approximate the song and move on? So that's what's going on. So what you want to fill your practice with, especially if you're trying to build practice time, just a little bit of time working on 1 or 2 small technical things. If you'll do this for about 10 minutes a day for about 5 days, the results will be so significant and your playing will improve so much. No, you will not become a virtuoso in 5 days. But what will happen is these start to get out of the way between your brain, your heart, and your instrument. I don't like these. They are my enemy. I've fought with them all my life because I want them to do things that my brain and heart want to come out of the instrument.
And sorry, Greg, for the benefit of our audio listeners, I should mention you're wiggling your fingers there.
These, my hands, I'm sorry. And when you start working on the smallest areas that you think are meaningless, but let's face it, they're not because your fingers aren't going where you want them to go, right? So doesn't it make sense to start training the fine motor skills? When you start to do that, the fingers start to move out of the way. The hands start to move out of the way of your intentions, and they obey your intentions instead of resist them. When that starts to happen, even in the smallest areas, things that you've been working on for a long time, I'm not saying you'll perfect them, but they will get much better. And that's where the whole idea of actually achieving things, creating motivation, when that starts to happen in the smallest way, and I can pretty much guarantee these type of results if you do it correctly with 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week. No, you're not going to become a virtuoso doing that for years, but that will create the foundation from which you can play things you couldn't play before and will create massive motivation. Because let's face it, folks, you're not motivated because you're not getting what you want. As soon as you start to get what you want, the motivation will go through the roof. And if you start to get 10 times more, not than you want, but that you thought you could ever do, oh my gosh, you won't be able to, you'll have a hard time staying in bed in the morning. And I had this experience when I figured this out, where it was a summer and I didn't have to be at class or work or anything. And I was trying to sleep in the morning when I had started figuring this out. And I couldn't stay in bed because I would be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm probably a half hour away from finishing this section. And I would have to pull myself out of bed to go do it. And that's how much enthusiasm. And I've been through this, even though I have music degrees, I've been through this, the play and pray, not knowing. And boy, when that happened, I was surprised when I couldn't sleep more when I wanted to and forced myself out of bed. And that's how much motivation it provides.
Amazing. I'm sure that sounds like a dream come true for a lot of people who are grinding away at their practice to genuinely feel that enthusiasm to get back to their instrument on a consistent basis over time. And I want to just underscore something there because based on everything that was said in the survey, I know a lot of people will have been expecting the answer to that question to sound something like, well, spend 10 minutes on scales, and then you must make sure you do bars 1 through 10 of each of your 3 pieces, and then you must do this other thing. Because that's so much of what we hear. When we have a good teacher, they tell us what to practice, and it sounds like that kind of minute by minute schedule a lot of the time. But your answer wasn't prescriptive in that way. It was much more generalizable and personalizable than that, I think.
Going down to the very basics. What is it your fingers are doing that you don't want them to do? If every time I go to, play a scale passage, several of the notes are muted, then let's work on that, whatever it is. In fact, if you're studying with a private teacher of your instrument, my advice would be just go ask them what are the two. If he or she had, you said, I will do anything you want and I don't care about playing music or anything. What two things would you like me to work on? I can almost imagine, well, your finger placement's a little bit off. We've been talking about it every week, but I let it go because you want to play entire songs because you think that that's the more motivation. Okay, let's work just on your finger placement for 5 minutes. And you know what? The way you're holding the pick or the bow, you have to change your pinky here. And you're not doing that because to do that would take away from learning the whole song, which you're not learning. So if you fix those two little things, then you can learn the song more easy. So it's prescriptive in that you want to break it down to something that you'd like to do a little bit better. But no, it's not like one of those you have to play scales for this amount of time and arpeggios for that amount of time.
And I think, again, that's quite liberating, right? Because if you're given that recipe, as it were, you're always going to be second guessing it a bit and wondering, should I adjust this or do that? Whereas taking this kind of problem solving mentality to it, I think makes everything approachable, and you realize it doesn't really matter if you do it this way or that way, or focus more on this week and so on.
It makes it so simple. That's the thing. Make it simple. And if you think about it, the brain cannot multitask. If anyone thinks they can read the research on this, I'm not going to go into it, but the brain can't multitask. And when we're trying to learn a song before we've developed 5 or 10 skills that we need to do the song isn't going to happen. So the idea that we just take care of one problem at a time is simple. How hard it is to play an entire song, how easy it is to just check that my finger's in the right place. And then another one, just check my finger's in the right place. Before you know it, that 5 minutes is melted off the clock because you will be involved in flow, constant problem solving. Before you know it, the timer goes off and the 10 minutes are up. Before you know it, 5 days are up and everything is working better. And now you're sold on this idea. But to piggyback on what you were saying, it's incredibly simple to do. And it's not that hard to get going. It'll become harder when your motivation is so massive that you want to do 2 hours a day and hit 5 different areas. That's great. We can build up to that. It's always simple, though. It's always about solving whatever the problem is. And you just drill down until you find what the problem is, and then you build up from there. And once you learn and you say, well, geez, I don't know everything about my instrument. Well, you can get that type of instruction is out there. It's how you go about doing it. And you'll figure it out on your own. This doesn't work. I'll work on just that. That doesn't work. I'll work on just that. And it's how you work on it. Pay attention to the small details. You will become engrossed in that because there will always be a question answer going on in your mind. Before you know it, 5 days is up and you're a lot more motivated because you're getting results.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Greg. As I went through these survey responses, I was really glad I was going to be able to call you in to address some of them, because the pain and frustration and needless suffering, to put it bluntly, that is going on in the world of music learning, it really makes me itch to do something about it. And I know no one better than you to help with that. I sometimes say, if I could just wave a magic wand and put this in people's heads, and I think everything we've covered today falls in that category. But it's, as you say, it's simple, but it's easier said than done. And so that's why we're collaborating now on this new course together. And I couldn't be more excited, because for everything we do in musicality training at Musical U, we kind of wave our hand at instrument technique and say, oh yeah, all of the talent is a myth stuff applies there too. And you could get very, very good at your instrument if you just knew the right things to do. For the first time, we're actually tackling that question, which I find super exciting, and doubly so because we have you teaching the course, Greg. Any final parting words of wisdom for our audience today?
I know there are so many tools out there and so much information. In this day and age, it's very easy to find. And even if you're able to find all the good information, I know how hard it is to know when to apply it, where to apply it, and how it works. This can be very frustrating. And in fact, that's why we're doing this course, to cut through all of that and get right to what works, when it works, and how it works. And whether you join us for the course or not, I would really encourage you to just look into the small areas of science, look for the small things you can improve through deliberate practice, and try to become a much more enthusiastic, which you can, a much more enthusiastic practicer and musician. Whether we can help you with that or not, it would be great if you just tried that stuff.
100%. Well, I think you said in our past interview, Greg, something like, we're both in it for the right reasons. We believe in that mission, and we certainly do. As you say, whether you join us for the course or not, we just wholeheartedly encourage you to explore this stuff because it can help pretty much every single one of the frustrations that came up in this survey. So if you're feeling like you're not making enough practice, if you don't have enough time, if your motivation's waning, it's not your fault. It's not that you lack talent. It's not that you're not disciplined enough. It's that the way you're approaching practice is not what it could be. And if you transform it in the ways we've been talking about today, you will be astonished at the results you can get and the increased motivation, satisfaction, fulfillment, all that good stuff that starts to happen in your musical life. If you're watching this episode as it airs, then next week we're going to be announcing the course officially and giving you the chance to join us for the first group of students to go through it. If you're watching it in the past, head to the show notes for this episode at musicalitynow.com, where we'll have full details. As always, we'll have links to everything mentioned in the show notes for this episode, including Greg's past interview here on the show and all of the references he mentioned for things like deliberate practice and flow and so on. All that remains is to say a huge thank you again to Greg for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.